Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, but today we are continuing with the 100 Years of Movie series. This time we're talking about the 1960s, and I have my good friend David from Cartoon Fortress. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm great, Nathan. Always a good day when I get to chat film with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've known each other for the longest time, even before you had your channel, right?
Yeah, it's been I don't know, at least a couple
I
years.
think 2 or 3 years now,
Yeah,
which
yep,
is, yeah, it's just weird how time flies by. And
yep.
here we are just making fun content, hopefully that everyone is enjoying this 100 Years of Movie series. And yeah, if you haven't checked out David's his channel, Cartoon Fortress, it's great and constantly evolving and a lot of good stuff over there that I know you and I are very similar types of collectors, the stuff that we like to enjoy. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I think I started watching your channel, yeah, before I really jumped off with content that I was producing. So yeah, it's been time is such a weird thing. It's but yes, it does predate my the content on my channel.
Yeah, I mean, well, with the last few years, it's everything's a little bit of a blur, especially,
Yeah.
and
Oh
it's just
yeah.
everyone probably feels that same way.
Yep.
But anyway, today we're talking about the 1960s, which we were talking a little bit earlier how difficult it was to kind of put a list together because I feel like the more you increase in years, like it starts getting harder because like obviously exposure for most of us who are watching this is like, well, we're getting closer to the years that like where golden cinema is out there, and or at least cinema from our childhood or stuff that like we
Mhm.
grew up with, and things that are more recent. And so it's probably pretty hard for a lot of us to kind of get those those pieces together, right?
Yeah, well, and yeah, and I've really enjoyed the series you've been doing, and yeah, I kind of go era by era as you're putting these videos out, and I'm kind of putting my own list together mentally, and it's just it's almost impossible. With the '60s, as I was preparing for this video, it's like every one that I picked, I knew I couldn't pick this, and so it's kind of like choosing your favorite child almost.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah,
I
lots of great films.
hmm Well, I mean, I'm excited to talk about a lot of films from like I have some of my childhood films and things that I've discovered, more recently, and I have all different types of films to kind of just recommend, and I'm sure you have some of those as well. And I hope that people can enjoy this conversation because the thing is, the '60s, especially in America, were insane, uh,
Hmm.
and I mean mostly socially and politically. So I think
Yep.
a lot of the films that we're going to be talking about probably have some of that reflection within, a lot of the things that they might present. During this time period, like the Cold War was happening, civil rights movement in America, assassinations were happening, Vietnam, just
I was going to say, spoiler alert, I will be touching on Vietnam, race relations. I mean,
mhm.
you can't avoid it in the '60s with the film, with the output that we had.
No, and but the other thing is too, like there's a lot of creative brilliance kind of coming forth from a lot of those tumultuous, events that are happening.
Yep.
Eventually the space race would happen at the end of the decade, and
Yep.
it's just a lot of these things are really really cool. So I'm excited to dive into some of these choices that what we have for everyone to kind of follow along and see if before we even get into our choices, anyone who's watching this, like let us know. I'm going to say it now and also at the end of the video, but let us know what some of your favorites down in the comment section from the 1960s. Anything that maybe we haven't seen, or some hidden gems, or even some blockbuster films that we didn't mention. But yeah, let us know down in the comment section down below. Okay, David.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to start with? Like, do we want to talk an honorable mention, or do we want to start off with like a first pick?
Let me. I'll jump into my stack here. So I've got a stack of five titles that I'll talk about, and then I do have some honorable mentions as well. But I figured, and these are the films that I'm talking about as well. They're in no particular order, and these aren't even necessarily um, my favorite films of the decade, but it's like this is a great representation of what the 60s had to offer, and talking about a few different themes. But I figured we'd start at ground zero here with 1960. I can't have the opportunity to talk about the 60s and not talk about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. So 1960, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, starring the great Anthony Perkins, one of the great Oscar snubs of all time for his performance, obviously, is Norman Bates here. And then Janet Leigh, of course, Vera Miles, John Gavin, and Martin Balsam. Martin Balsam, if I was talking 50s here, I would definitely be bringing up his performance in 12 Angry Men, one of my all-time favorites. But we're in the 60s, so we're not going to do that. Anyways, so Hitchcock with Psycho. So Psycho is my favorite of Hitchcock's films for a few different reasons, but what I found really interesting was that what he did with story here with this film. I mean, this must have, like, I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody who would have gone to the theater to see this. And I mean, this had to be a pretty shocking film. You're coming out of the 50s, kind of this era of, domestic bliss, and the Leave It to Beaver kind of era, if you will. And to come out of the 50s and straight away have something like this come out must have just been like, wow, okay, we're in a new era. And what Hitchcock, and I don't know if you haven't seen Psycho, I don't know what to tell you. Watch the film. It's been out for a while.
It's been out for a bit, yeah.
But what he does with story, you're not supposed to have a main character, a headline character, die 30 minutes into the film. Like, that's just not how you write a story. That's not, but that's what happened here. And so, and there's issues here of, obviously voyeurism. The same year we had 1960, we had Peeping Tom come out as well. So there's kind of this, these two films that, again, straight out of the gates, there's this kind of this idea of the breach of privacy, and even filming, within a bathroom and showing a toilet. I know that was, kind of
a shower scene.
They had crossed a line there. But, the idea that you're not even safe, within the privacy of, and I know she's in a motel, but you're not even safe in the privacy of your own bathroom, taking a shower. It's like that breach of privacy, I think, is really piercing. And even now, I've seen the film, my gosh, 30, 40 times, I'm sure. But even now, the shower scene and Norman entering the bathroom and that whole sequence, it still gets me.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's and of course, the music, and which is so iconic.
The shadows and
so much shadow play in that film. In the back parlor, when when Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh are having their conversation, and just the deep shadows. I mean, there's so much foreshadowing going on there, and even the when he goes and we get that close up on his eye looking through the peephole. Even and I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the painting, but even the painting that he removes from the wall to then look into the bathroom, the painting, I think, is, and I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the painting, but it had themes of, sexual violence and the theme around that specific piece. So anyways, so there's, these themes that are, kind of new to audiences. Like there were films prior that dealt with it, but this was just in such a stark manner in which Hitchcock was presenting these things. And so, and even within the characters, like our, our antagonist, Norman Bates, it's interesting to even dissect feelings of empathy, dare I say, for his character. Different things that he's going through, and I don't know. It's a really multi-layered film, and one that I come back to constantly. And the other thing that I wanted to mention as well, and I think you were pulling a William Castle set off the shelf there.
Homicidal.
Oh gosh, I
Yeah.
almost brought. No, I don't remember. Is
it came out a year.
Actually the 60s?
Yeah, 61. Yeah, it came out a year.
Oh,
it came out a year after Psycho. So
oh man, because Homicidal was one I was thinking about talking about. The reason I was pointing out you bringing the William Castle set out was because such a fantastic, both volumes are really great. I'd say Homicidal, and then I'll just go ahead and give one of my honorable mentions. Straight Jacket is on my list of honorable mentions.
I still haven't seen that one. It's in the second one, right?
Oh yeah, it is. It's in the second set.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. That and Homicidal are, I think, my two high points in those collections. But the way that William Castle marketed his films, there was kind of this play between Hitchcock and William Castle, and the way that they marketed their films. That they're showmen. I mean, it's Hitchcock with Psycho. Was the whole idea around no one being admitted to the film after the start of the film, because of course you want people walking in going, wait a minute, where's Janet Leigh? I thought this was a Janet Leigh film. Anyway, so really interesting marketing. And then of course, William Castle, he had so much showmanship with his, even down to installing buzzers within the theater seats, and
I think in the Homicidal there was like a 1 minute warning at the end. Here's everything is about to happen in a minute, so you can leave the theater if you need to.
Yeah. And then I don't remember if it was that same film. It's like if you did exit the theater, you had to go sign like a coward card or something. So if you weren't gutsy enough to stay and watch the film, you have to sign the coward card or stand in the coward's corner or something like that.
All those fun gimmicks he always did. So
yeah, which I couldn't adore the films of William Castle anymore. I think they're really great. But yeah, Psycho, it's incredible. If you haven't seen it, please watch it.
Yeah, definitely. The first one.
yeah, the first one. Funny story around Psycho, actually. So back in the day, Blockbuster Video, when that was a thing, I remember going with my dad to Blockbuster, and I already had a healthy interest in film, and I knew of Psycho, I knew of Alfred Hitchcock, and I wanted to rent Psycho, and of course it carries an R rating, and so my dad, it was an immediate no. And so young David, what did I do? So that week, I actually reached out. I promise you, I'm not lying here. I reached out directly to the MPAA and to Universal Studios directly. Like, I'm a kid, and I'm calling them. I'm getting whoever I can get on the phone, and I'm begging these people to change the rating on this film so that I can watch it. So needless to say, I did not get very far, with making that happen. But it's a fun memory to share with people that I felt the desire to watch Alfred Hitchcock films so much, and I was, kind of underage, whatever, and that I went to great lengths to try and make that happen, but it didn't happen for me.
When did you watch it after? Like, did you watch it not too long after that, or did you have to wait a little bit?
Yeah. So I was probably maybe 12, 13 years old, which
reasonable time to watch that.
Yeah, I would think. Obviously, I didn't share it, my dad didn't share that opinion, but anyways, yeah, no, I think it was just a couple years later, because then I started collecting, or I started taping films off of TV on VHS
Hmm.
on a regular basis. And so I built this giant, I was probably 700 or 800 VHS tapes
Yeah, I
by
remember
the
that.
time I was, yeah, by the time I was in, a senior in high school. I probably had, yeah, 700, 800 VHS tapes. And anyways, but one of my friends had told me, because he had seen Psycho, and told me, oh, wait until the end. Crazy, crazy twist in that movie.
Hmm.
And I'm like, stop telling me this. I can't
Yeah.
watch it. And so I sought it out and watched it. Yeah, not that long after that Blockbuster visit, but needless to say, one of my favorite films of all time.
Well, that's an excellent pick, and I mean, obviously, one of the most iconic Hitchcock films of all time, and like rightfully so, because like we kind of mentioned, it's like you don't really get the main character, you know, killed almost immediately in the film, and it just subverted a
Yeah.
lot of people's expectations, like you were kind of saying, just what we had seen previously with cinema. Like there was kind of hints with maybe something like Henry George Clouzot's films, and like there's some international stuff that were happening around the same time, and we were starting to get a little bit more like post-noir films into these Hitchcock films, and kind of getting into like the grittiness of reality. And I think Psycho is an excellent representation of that. So
Well,
it's
and of
incredible.
course we could talk about Diabolique, and kind of the really briefly, Hitchcock did pursue rights on that and lost out on rights. And then, Psycho was kind of almost kind of his answer to having lost rights on that, picked
Right.
up rights, obviously, to
Mhm.
Robert Bloch's, Psycho. Anyways, interesting to know.
Well, I think this is a good segue because I am thinking about childhood a little bit. That's kind of what I wanted to start off with my first like choice, that is like stuck with me as a kid quite a bit. One that luckily my dad was like, you know what, you can watch this with me because he liked it too. And so I'm talking about James Bond films. And so
Mm,
I actually was a big fan of the game GoldenEye back on the Nintendo
oh
64
yeah.
in the 90s, and that's kind of what I grew up on. And so I have this big 50th anniversary, box set right here of most of the Bonds, and obviously I watched a lot of the Connery films as well. And so the Connery films started in the 60s, like with Dr. No. But the film that I want to talk about in this set, if I can, I'm going to put down my mic for a second, see if you can still hear me.
Big
Um,
set.
yeah, and in the Bond 50th, the 60s, the film that I liked the most was 1964's Goldfinger. And Goldfinger is definitely like one of like the most archetypical James Bond stories, and rightfully so. It's an incredible one. But Goldfinger was certainly one that like captured my imagination because I had seen Goldeneye, of course, and and I had watched. It's weird because like all these golden movies, I even remember watching the Roger Moore Man with the Golden Gun with Christopher Lee,
Hmm.
back when I was younger. But I for some reason was like just fixated on like the gold related James Bond films, and GoldenEye was like my favorite of the Connery films. And I obviously had watched Austin Powers later on, and saw those connections too. It's like, oh, well, that's just that character doing this thing, and it's just really funny how they parodied that later on. But I had all the VHSs of the James Bond films, and it's just those are really fond memories. I haven't seen Goldfinger in quite a bit though, although there's a lot of iconic moments in that film in particular that I will never forget. And yeah, so like thinking about James Bond, I mean, I've gotten so far to get the Blu-rays here, but I used to have the VHSs. I had those 4 DVD, like 20, like there's 5 films in each box sets.
Right.
I don't know if
Right.
anyone remembers those, but
Hmm.
I used to collect all the Bonds, and yeah, so that was my first pick. I'm sure you've seen a lot of James Bond films.
Well, it's funny. Goldfinger is my favorite Bond film. I love it. In fact, that was probably the first Bond film that I saw. And actually, no, to can I answer your question? I'm not well versed in Bond. I'm well versed in Sean Connery, and then Daniel Craig. You know, obviously
Right,
the
later
newer
ones. Yeah.
But no, I've actually wanted to. I feel like it's way past time for me to really dive in onto the Bond films. But yeah, Goldfinger's my favorite. You know, Doctor No and Thunderball.
Hmm.
Thunderball, and I actually haven't seen any of those three for a very long time.
Yeah.
But
Been a while for
I
me
remember
too.
Thunderball being a really really fun one.
Yeah. All underwater pretty much.
And yeah, so I'll have to go back. I I'm kind of planning on, you know, with the new Daniel Craig movie coming out. I'm hoping
Eventually
they
coming out.
do, yeah, eventually coming out. I'm hoping they do kind of an exhaustive set, 'cause I think that's going to be his final.
Yeah, he's kind of tired of it. I can
Yeah,
understand why.
so I
So
think if they put out a set, you know, a comprehensive set of, you know, Connery to, you know, his last film, Daniel Craig's
mhm.
last film, I think that's where I'll pick it up, and then I'm just going to start, you know, kind of my Bond education. But I
Yep.
know there's even some YouTubers out there that have you know, really great YouTube channel. Actually, I'll plug here. Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader is the channel name, and he is his content is fantastic, but he goes into massive depth on Bond. He's gone as far as to record audio commentaries for the films,
Oh wow.
and he has those on his channel, and they're ready to play alongside as you watch
Right,
the,
of
you know, the
course.
Bond films. But anyways, he has other great content. Love the Sean Connery films. Looking forward to diving into those, you know, other Bond films as
Yeah, of
well.
course. But I also wanted to like just briefly mention these because I mean these honorable mentions from my childhood that I remember alongside the James Bond films. Like obviously as a kid, and I'm sure we'll talk about this because I'm sure we'll talk about some animated things. But like you know the Peanuts films, like the from the '60s. You know, we got Charlie Brown Christmas and you know the It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Those two in
Yeah,
particular were like the '60s Charlie Brown films, and so I
yeah.
obviously watch these every year, and you know, these are things that have never escaped my childhood, and so yeah, I always have fond memories with these particular ones. And Charles Schultz is actually a long lost second cousin of my dad's side, so that's how I'm
I
related,
remember
even
you.
though yeah.
I remember you bringing that up.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I guess I'll go ahead and mention my honorable mention of A Boy Named Charlie Brown. Was on my honorable list, and that's one that I've seen, you know, again countless times. Really, that and Snoopy Come Home were ones that I watched constantly as a kid. You know, wore out the VHS copies of, and then of course, yeah, the holiday, you know, the holiday classics. But yeah, I'm glad we are able to bring up Charlie Brown in this discussion.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll bring up here, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but I remember also obsessing over this franchise, and I really loved the first movie. And then I got the VHSs, and I actually had a big old box of it. And I'm actually talking about the Planet of the Apes series.
Oh,
The Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes. Actually, when I was a kid, I just was like super obsessed with, and like these big sci-fi kind of adventure. And you know, I don't know, it just alongside you know the Bond films, it just makes sense to kind of my dad really liked these films, and so I really like them. And I remember having, like I said, that VHS box set that I want to say I got it from Sam Goody. Um, back in the 90s, and so that's actually when I
you're dating yourself here. You're
listen.
aging yourself here.
I'm not that old, but people who are watching this know about that. I'm glad if they do. But
Yeah.
yeah, I this is you know the legacy edition with the first five, but I really liked all of them. I never watched the show from the 80s. I think was in the 80s or the late 70s is when they had that show. Uh,
I do not. I don't recall. My Planet of the Apes is largely a blind spot for me. I've seen the first film,
mhm.
but for whatever reason, haven't ventured past that. So that might be.
They're all fun.
I might
So
even need to pick up that set.
But yeah, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which is the second one, I love how they just keep going weirdly in time with this stuff, and like I don't know, I think they're all pretty good. But maybe that's nostalgia speaking. I have no idea, because I haven't seen them in quite some time. But the first one always going to be stuck in my mind, so I love that stuff. And so those are my fun films. That was for my first pick, my Goldfinger, and then Charlie Brown and Planet of the Apes. Those are some stuff that I remember as a kid, just having those VHSs and just constantly watching them. So
awesome.
Yeah. What about your next pick?
All right. So next in line, and this, like I said, these are in no particular order, but this happens to be my favorite film of all time. It's not only my favorite film, but it's my favorite book and my favorite performance of all time. So it's kind of really, this hits right on the bullseye for me. And this is Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. So I was introduced to the novel in high school, which is where I read it for the first time. Shout out to Mr. Sutherland, my English teacher. So we read the novel, and then I don't recall if we watched the film in class or if I went and sought it out afterwards, but I was just immediately in love with the book, and shortly thereafter the film. Why is it my favorite film of all time? Well, first and foremost, the source novel from Harper Lee is just incredible. And when you go over into the actual film, Gregory Peck gives, in my personal opinion, the best performance in cinema history. I can't get enough of it, and it's interesting because I saw an interview recently via some documentary, and Gregory Peck's son was on there commenting, and you know what? It might have been, what's the documentary that we were introduced to recently, you and I, These Amazing Shadows?
Oh, right. Yeah. The PBS documentary, These Amazing Shadows.
Don't quote me on that, but I think it was in that documentary. But I watch a lot of documentaries.
No, I remember there being a To Kill a Mockingbird section in that movie. So.
Okay, then it probably was. So it was interesting because his son was saying that, his father, Gregory,
I know what you're talking about.
He even really wanted to be Atticus Finch, and it's like, real life, like obviously, to fall short of, what this character is, is understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But just to know the impact that it had on Gregory Peck and on, the man that he wanted to be as well is just really interesting to note. But I actually have this note attached to my computer here in front of me, and it's 2 words, and it's because of this character that I have these words up, and that is quiet dignity. And it's just a reminder to me on how I want to present myself, quiet dignity. And that's something that I took from this character. And so, when you're putting notes up in your office of how to act, that, a performance had an impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
But so first and foremost, in terms of the film, just Gregory Peck's performance, and then Mary Badham, who plays Scout, is just phenomenal. I mean, the film every single time brings me to tears, just because I think this is largely a story. Now it's very multifaceted. We do have issues of even race relations and and that type of thing, obviously, that's included here. But I think largely this is a story of the loss of innocence. The arc of what Scout encounters, and then her and her brother Jim, but more we're focused on Scout. There's a real loss of innocence, and I think one of the issues that the Atticus encounters is that he can't protect his kids from everything. And as they're going through the trial of Tom Robinson, and there's Boo Radley, and kind of everything that's uncovered from that kind of plot or storyline. She, you know, speaking on Scout, she comes to have an understanding of things that maybe she wasn't prepared for, wasn't ready for, but you know, life was happening and things are happening in their little town,
That does.
and you know, nasty things of this world are presenting themselves. And so I just really enjoy the way that so Robert Mulligan directed the film, and just everything in terms of the direction is just pitch perfect. And the final scene, and I don't, you know, again, even with Psycho, you know, this, I don't want to give like everything away if you haven't seen the film,
Although
but
people should have seen these by now, hopefully.
People should have seen these by now. But there's a conversation at the end of the film between Atticus and Sheriff Tate, and there's this specific line of, you know, let the dead bury the dead. And man, oh man, has that just that final scene, you know, the way everything is carried out, it has just really stuck with me. And then obviously, you know, Scout's interaction with Boo Radley, you know, there at the end, and that's typically the point where she discovers Boo, you know, behind the door. That's typically where the floodgates open for me, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like Scout she just gets it. She's so kind of wise beyond her years with certain things, and then very naive with other things. And so it's this interesting kind of duality within her character. And it's a beautiful film. And I just there's nothing out there that I think, or you know, that I've seen to this point that would take its place. I mean, this is really the top of the stack for me in terms of films that I've seen. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but it's such a treasure.
Well, I mean, I would definitely agree that it's like literally one of the best adaptations of a book into a film ever. And I was introduced to it in junior high. I want to say maybe 8th grade, so right before high school, for me in an English class. And I remember being, I want to say we watched it in class as well. We had like a VHS copy of it there. And maybe a DVD copy. I don't remember, but I think we had one of those rolling TVs that, you know, you'd check out and
Sure.
the teacher would bring in, and that's kind of how we did it. But yeah, it's just one of those films that you just don't forget, and one of those books that you just don't forget, because it's one of those stories that, you know, kind of unveils this section of society, this certain time period that, and at the time, like, you know, if this was like a film that came out in a perfect setting and spot. Like, I feel like this should have been made at this time, and rightfully so, you know. And so I think it's socially, you know, poignant to be put out around this time period. So excellent choice.
Well, you know, and it's interesting to note as well that this is still a book that's actually actively being banned in schools.
Yep.
My stepmom is a 4th grade teacher, and I was actually having this conversation with her because this is also one of her favorites. There was an article that came out that there was, you know, a whole district of schools down in the South, you know, that put out a ban on, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird. And we're kind of having a conversation about that it's interesting that, you know, obviously a lot of the themes that are present in the film are things that we're dealing with now, maybe even more so than we were then.
Right. Exactly.
You know, so it's sad, you know, it's also very telling. But, you know, Harper Lee wrote, you know, a really magnificent piece, and I'm glad that we still get to enjoy it if that's what we choose to do, I guess.
Yeah. And I hope the people who are watching this, I know most of us are not in school anymore, or maybe we're in college or something. But if you haven't read this, like, do yourself a favor, read that book, and also watch that movie, because they're both incredible. So
let me turn my
look at there.
here.
Yeah, there it is.
I have this vinyl print of that's my favorite
it's a good book
cover or edition. Yeah. And so my wife actually got me a vinyl. So this is actually the exact one that they have up in Barnes and Noble. I went and asked a manager where they have their that are book covers that they have up in the store produced, and so I went direct through the company. And
Oh, nice. Well, that's an excellent choice, and I think thinking about like that coming of age kind of losing of innocence kind of colors the next choice that I have for what I've chosen. Except this is a documentary series that started out in the 60s, and it started in 1964. Actually, just was introduced this last year, and also unfortunately, the person who has been filming these documentaries has just recently passed, unfortunately, and I'm talking about the Up series right here. So, 7 Up, which is from 1964, this experiment with these different children. Every 7 years, he wants to kind of catch up what's going on with their lives, and kind of just this social experiment, and kind of seeing how society in these different functions of, whether they're rich or poor, or how whatever their childhood kind of shows, like how their upbringing is, who they're married to, if they have children, how it just kind of goes up from there. Actually, the last one that just recently happened was 63 Up, which I'm trying to even remember when that came out. But yeah, this is an incredible series of just like, if you're interested in a lot of coming of age stuff, I clearly am. Like, I have Richard Linklater stuff above me, and
I love that trilogy.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll get to that in the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s when I do those. But yeah, this series has continuously happened, but unfortunately, Mr. Apt, passed away. Unfortunately, Michael Apt, who is the one who started this whole thing and has continued to do this. So I'm actually kind of curious if they're going to do 70 Up. I'm sure they will. And probably talk a lot about how much Michael has been a part of, this whole thing. And so, have you seen the Up series?
No, I was actually going to make a comment here. I have these in my cart because of you,
Mm-hmm.
because of your recommend, because you've talked about this before, and I am massively interested in this series. And so these are done by a company called Network.
Yep.
And on Network's site, they actually are putting out a documentary series called The Story of Film.
Okay.
And I have that, and then there's 2 Blu-rays from the Up series in their store. So I have those 3 items in my cart, and I'm just waiting for the right time to hit, to make that purchase. But no, I'm very aware of the series because of you.
Well, it's an incredible, and if anyone hasn't, like, this is probably, at all the things I'll probably be talking about, probably the most obscure, I guess. And this is a British series, by the way. I didn't mention that either, but so it's following people in the UK and their growth and the places that they live too, because some of them have moved out of the country and moved to different places. I think one's in the States, one's in Australia. So there's just they're all over the place, to be honest, and it's very interesting to kind of see not even just like them growing up, but also like the psychological aspects of, like, I'm being filmed. Some people dropping out of the experiment, not wanting to like really divulge anything, or like being they start questioning like the fortitude and or the like the reasons why, like why are you filming us, kind of a thing. Like, this is, it goes all over the place with these things, and I think it's really interesting to kind of just like, start off from the basis from 1960, 1964 from the first one, and kind of just saying like, they're all just children, they're all 7 years old, and they have dreams and aspirations, and like some of them are very excited, some of them are very shy, and like then you'll see them grow up. And the thing is, like, how much it really puts into perspective, if you're watching this, it really kind of shows like, well, how much are we willing to like invade the privacy of other people's lives, but also at the same time, like, how much do we actually need to know about other people? So it's really fascinating, and it really does bring up some moral questions. And I don't know, I just really love this series, and I hope it continues. And if people don't feel comfortable participating in it, that's also fine. So like, just I want more people to know about this series, because it's great. So
And I don't remember if this was you that said this, then I give you full credit. Had you brought up that there's kind of an interesting dynamic between maybe what they did with that series and then what Linklater did with Boyhood, kind of mimicking that? I don't know if you had brought that up.
a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it is kind of interesting to note. I do wonder if Linklater took any notes, from
probably.
that series with Boyhood, because I
Right.
believe it was 7 years
Thir-
total.
13
Oh,
for,
was it? Oh,
yeah, I want
okay.
to say 13 for Boyhood, how many years he took
Oh,
to film that one.
oh, yeah, and that's a film that I love. I love Boyhood.
Yeah, it's great. And also, like, with these movies, like the fiction, but they're 9 years apart from each other, and like he's playing with time as well, and kind of seeing how
Yep,
that unfolds. But yeah,
yep,
great stuff. I think everyone should watch those films, and start off with Seven Up. So, and I'm talking about the drink, of course.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
what about your next choice?
yeah. So here's where we're gonna get, maybe a little bit more political. So again, one of the greatest films of all time, one of the most influential films of all time. This is George A. Romero's Night of the Living
Okay,
Dead.
you took it right out of. I have it
Did,
here
did I
too.
take did I take one out of
No,
your pile?
not at all. But I have it right
No,
here too.
nice. Um, yeah, so directed by the great George A. Romero, starring Dwayne Jones, Judith O'Dea, and Carl Hardman. And this is co-written. So George A. Romero, as well as John A. Russo, wrote the film. But um, if you're used to the films of Romero, and he's another one that there's still a lot of blind spots in his filmography, but between this and, say, Dawn of the Dead, um, he's commenting on things directly with these films. Like, he's not accidentally, you know, talking about things. There's direct comments here on, themes of, America and Vietnam, kind of,
Hmm.
distrust of leadership. And this is maybe the only part that he didn't mean to talk about, issues of racism.
Yeah, and he's even mentioned that several times. Like, I didn't mean to talk about it like that. So,
No. So Dwayne Jones, who is, our right here,
our black lead,
um,
one of our
yeah,
black lead. Yeah.
the black lead, he hired the actor because he was a great actor who happened to be African American.
Hmm.
And it got blown out into this issue of, oh wow, he was commenting on racism. And of course, I won't give away the spoiler again, but at the end of the film, this character reaches a certain fate. And it wasn't at all what he had in mind when he was making the film. He hired Dwayne uh, because he was a great actor. Like, imagine that. Like, hiring someone because they're a great actor,
Right.
not because of the color of their skin. um and there's similarities that you can draw from, even down to the black and white filming, kind of looking, like a newsreel, like a wartime, like newsreel, again, kind of commenting on Vietnam here. But that and the gore, there's that interplay, kind of the power struggle between characters that goes on in the farmhouse that they're holed
Hmm.
up in. And then you even have an interesting, because usually with war, we, at least traditionally, we think of, the Civil War, brother versus brother, brother killing brother. And here we have this interesting kind of, and I don't know if this is anything at all. I might be grasping for straws here, but there's kind of this flop on that, and we actually literally have daughter killing mother,
Hmm.
which I think is interesting. And one of those scenes that it's another one of those scenes that just every time
Unnerving.
I'm like, oh
Whoa.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, wow. No matter how many times I've seen it, it's still like kind of slightly look away. But um and then also, kind of war, or just the act of war, kind of turning people into zombies, just following orders. And I don't know, some of that stuff might be, me just,
I think I
kind
get
of
what you're
digging
saying
in
though.
a little too far. But
Hmm.
yeah. And actually, my first exposure to Night of the Living Dead um came by way of Halloween 2.
Oh yeah.
So there's a scene in there where there's an older couple, and Michael Myers is making his way through a neighborhood, and there's an older lady making dinner for her husband, and she calls into her husband, and I believe he's asleep in the chair, and he's watching Night of the Living Dead. And I believe the scene is, Barbara, they're coming for you, Barbara.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's I remember seeing that. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to find out what film that is. Obviously, this is years and years ago.
Right.
Because I watched Halloween 2 pretty early on. Probably my parents didn't know that, but
don't watch this.
But yeah, I don't know. I won't tell them about this video. But yeah, Halloween 2, and just immediately like, wow, what is that? And I love, that they, there was that nod to Romero through that film. I think was pretty cool. But really quick though, I'm not going to go in depth, but the edition by Criterion.
Oh yeah.
This is the edition that you
Buy
want
it
if you don't own the film. And funny enough, I actually have two. Hang on, let me grab this really quick.
Okay.
I actually have two editions of the film, so I have this as well.
Oh wow.
This is what they call the 50th anniversary collector's edition ultimate fan box. And this actually has the Criterion edition inside. And then it's also got a graphic novel, and then it's some kind of certificate, something like that. But this is long out of print, but a cool edition nonetheless. And then you get this. It's just this really neat box set. And I'm a big fan of the film, and so that's one that I had to pick up. But the edition by Criterion is absolutely fantastic on this one, and yeah, if you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, it is absolutely essential.
And I don't know when this is coming out exactly, but if you can still buy it for the sale, so I mean, there's going to be a few other things that I actually have a few other Criterions to mention, because my next choice is actually related to this. It came out the same year. I actually wanted to mention Night of the Living Dead, but my favorite, since we're talking about horror films, my favorite film from this time period, 1968, is Rosemary's Baby, right here, which is just an incredibly terrifying film, just because of that, like, suburbia, and like, just there's this whole idea of trust, and then there's also that paranoia from, just who can you trust. And if anyone's not seen this movie, like, this one I think just got out of print from Criterion, and now,
unfortunately,
but there is a standard release that just was put out as well, so if you haven't picked that up, like, you can do so still. But yeah, this is an incredible film about a woman who's kind of going mad a little bit from forces that are unseen, and really you don't know, like, if that's real or imagined. And John Cassavetes is in this, of course. And we obviously we just see so much incredible performances here, especially by Mia Farrow, who's our main character. But yeah, they're a married couple, and they live in this apartment building loft kind of area, and like they got new neighbors, and a lot of things are kind of going awry, and you don't just know what to trust. But this is an incredible film. I don't really want to talk too much about it if you haven't seen it, but it's very unnerving. Roman Polanski directed this, which is another thing to comment on. Roman Polanski, obviously pretty infamous for the things that he's done, but also he's put out some really great films. This is part of, I guess, an unofficial trilogy, Repulsion and Cul-de-sac, which are also on Criterion. I've only seen Repulsion, but it's kind of that paranoia trilogy of things kind of just messing with your mind. And they're all great films, except, I mean, I haven't seen Cul-de-sac, but I would highly recommend Rosemary's Baby if anyone's not seen it, because it's a film you will never forget. That's just how I'll say it. So very graphic movie.
I've not forgotten that one either. In fact, so I have Repulsion in my collection. That's a really that's a really effective film. Like, visually, some of the things that he does in there are pretty crazy. But yeah, Rosemary's Baby is definitely classic. I also have not seen Cul-de-sac. So.
Yeah, it's one that I need to get. But the other honorable mention I'll say, besides Night of the Living Dead, which was for me, but another horror film from the early 60s that is still very, very effective and very atmospheric for me is 1961's The Innocents, right
Oh
here.
yeah,
And this movie still scares the hell out of me.
yeah,
These are the types of horror movies that really kind of unnerve me. So, obviously I've mentioned the fact that I love The Witch, and I like a lot of like Hereditary, if you're talking about some contemporary horror films. I just really like films that are drenched in atmosphere and drenched in like unnerving, like paranoia, that kind of plays tricks in your mind, and they're really, with some scares here and there, can really just kind of mess with you. And The Innocents is like one of those early examples where it's like there was The Haunting, which also came out around this time period as well, which is an incredible film.
yeah.
Incredible haunted house film, but like The Innocents, like, I think turns that up a little bit on the knob of like, it's like, okay, what the hell's going on around here? Things are really strange. And yeah, if you haven't seen this, it's got Deborah Carr in it as well. It's co-written by Truman Capote and directed by Jack Clayton. So really great people who are working on this film. But yeah, this is a film that I think highly needs your attention, and also it's a Criterion, so you can pick it up during the sale. So. You seen The
Yeah,
Innocent?
I've seen The Innocents, and I think in terms of the Innocents versus The Haunting, I prefer The Innocents. For whatever reason, The Haunting didn't really grab me, and I've actually only seen The Haunting and The Innocents once.
Mm-hmm.
So the two films, but just kind of immediate thoughts is I prefer The Innocents. I think it was, as you're saying, very, very atmospheric, and one that I think would reward repeat viewings,
Oh yeah.
because I think there's things being done there that you might not be grabbing on just a first time view. But awesome pick. Yeah, definitely a good recommendation for the sale.
But what's your next pick?
All right, so moving right along, we're dealing directly with race relations here in this film, and that definitely was intentional on the part of Stanley Kramer, who directed Spencer Tracy, Sidney Poitier, and Katharine Hepburn in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I don't know if you have the you got the indicator. Nice.
Oh, this is the standard one, but yeah.
Yeah, the standard. I know, I did miss out on the limited, with the booklet and everything, but yeah, that's well, there was that, and then yeah, To Serve with Love, I did grab the limited on with indicator, but and that's another great Sidney Poitier film. Man, this is another one. It's like, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have access to this film. I love this film so much. And again, so this is directed by Stanley Kramer and written by William Rose. And this is a film that really takes on race relations head on. And not only that, but they take it a step further and they talk about interracial relationships, which is really the main focus here. So Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, their daughter, comes home from I don't remember if she's traveling for work or whatnot, but she comes
He's about to
across Sidney.
travel.
Yeah, some kind of travel, and she's coming back home, and she comes back home and she's saying that she's going to introduce her fiance to her parents. And that's of course Sidney Poitier. And this is a time coming in the 60s. I believe this was this 64, 67, 1967.
Yep, 67.
Yeah, and so obviously the civil rights movement and kind of that era is in full play here. And so not only are we dealing with these two and her parents, but then his parents come into play as well, and there's conversations that take place, and they're kind of trying to dissect this issue and understand like how is this going to work. The world does not accept this, this interracial relationship. And in one of the great monologues in film history, Spencer Tracy, rest in peace, I love Spencer Tracy, gives one of the best moments, and certainly one of my favorite moments of the 60s. And I have quoted here because I'm not that good. I can't, memorize all these things. But he has a monologue that ends the entire film. And he says, speaking on the relationship between these two and kind of referencing his own relationship with his wife, Katharine Hepburn, he says, in the final analysis, it doesn't matter a damn what we think. The only thing that matters is what they feel and how much they feel for each other. And if it's half of what we felt, that's everything. It doesn't get simpler than that, people. No. It doesn't get simpler than that. And it's another, I'm going to sound like a crybaby because I was talking about
I'm getting teary, so don't keep going.
Because I'm talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, bringing me tears every time. If Spencer Tracy's monologue does not reduce you to tears, it's just every single time. And just the way that he presents himself, and the way that they deal with this situation, and it's just incredible. One of the great lines and performances really of all time from everybody in the film. I mean, it's so wonderful. And I love the comment that it makes on race. And I mean, there's a conversation too between Sidney Poitier and his father, where Sidney Poitier gives one of his best, maybe my favorite performance from him, where he gets so just down to the point with his father. And it's this interesting dynamic between father and son, and him trying to describe to his father what he wants and who he is, and then to have the film end with the monologue from Spencer Tracy,
right,
it's just ridiculously good. So
it's an incredible pick, and it took me forever to get that Indicator edition, because I had seen it actually on the Criterion channel last year for the first time. I had watched parts of it. I know.
I didn't realize they had that on the channel. That's great. I
had it on the channel for a second, and I just never picked up because I know that's the Digipack, and I've been wanting that one.
Yeah.
But
yeah, really nice.
Yeah, those Digipacks are beautiful. I love some of my favorite films of all time are on those, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I have the King Kong from the 30s. Like I love that stuff. But I'm glad that I was finally able to watch it. And like obviously it's a little dated on some of the things that are it's talking about, but at the same time, like the message still kind of rings true, and still hopefully can at least get people aware of the things that, like, you're not going to be like, not everyone's in a mixed race relationship or understands what that's like, or anything that could potentially become, or how other people see them. And it is a challenge. And honestly, the more and more, as we, as a society and around the world, we start just talking more and more, and we're culturally just going everywhere, this is going to happen more and more. So it's still prevalent today, and I think it's still a very relevant movie. So I think it's a good choice. So
and again, I can't reiterate enough, the monologue that he gives in here, Spencer Tracy. It breaks it down to kind of its most, the simplest components.
Mm-hmm.
Two people love each other and want to make something work. Done.
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be really tough, but just do it.
Yeah, but people love to just make things more difficult. Like that's what it is. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about. And I mean, we could take that conversation a lot of places, but I love just that the commentary from that film. So and what you were saying as well, there are elements here and there that it's like, oh wow, that's pretty dated.
Right. Like, I'm not going to pretend. About the 60s, everyone, different time period. So like, some of the things that they were commenting on, maybe a little bit whitewashy, but at the same time, it's, eventually you get to the point where it's like, oh, well, the message of this is still intact, and it's still trying to shed some light into something, so I think it's still important.
And that's one reason too, why I think, things like cancel culture in some regards can be kind of toxic in and of itself, is because, yeah, there's things that are dated, and there's things that are, it's like wrong is wrong, right is right,
Hmm.
but it gets us having conversations about these things.
Right.
And that's,
Conversations is the biggest thing to have.
yeah, and that's what I love having, is conversations about these things. You know, what can these things teach us, good or bad? There's the good and bad with everything. And so, and this, I think the resounding message there is largely positive, very positive, but it does have those elements where it's like, oh yeah, we wouldn't, I wouldn't necessarily say that this way, or label this person this way, or
Right.
whatever. But getting people to have the conversation is really key.
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent choice, and I actually pulled something aside because you just mentioned the good and the bad, and so I had to say the ugly here.
Oh,
Um, this is actually just an honorable mention, but I did want to mention like the spaghetti westerns that happened around this time period too, because
yeah,
this was a big transition for westerns because it started getting gritty. The Wild Bunch was around this time period. We're seeing, I guess Wild Bunch is like right around the tip of the '60s, early '70s. So, but
yeah,
you're seeing a lot of grit coming from like Sergio Leone, a lot of the spaghetti westerns. John Wayne's getting older. So is Jimmy Stewart was in a few in the '50s, and like there's a transition here, but this is the last in this unofficial trilogy right here. Obviously, everyone who has seen this understands like how iconic this film is. And it's a really great performance by Clint Eastwood, obviously, and
yeah,
just the amongst yeah, I can never say his name right. Eli Wallach, of course, who's been
yeah,
in a lot of great noirs, and then Lee Van Cleef, who's also in a lot of great westerns too. I'm sure he's in other types of films that I haven't seen, but I love this film. But I wanted to mention
absolutely.
that because you said
Yeah, well, and the Sartana films, and Django, and speaking on the spaghetti westerns.
Mhm.
In fact, there's a really cool set coming out the end of this month called Vengeance Trails
Oh yeah, from
from
Arrow.
Arrow Video,
Hmm.
that I've got on pre-order, that I'm really excited about. But yeah, spaghetti westerns is, um, I'm adding quite a bit to my collection
Hmm.
from kind of that category. So
Well, I actually kind of want to transition from here because we talked about spaghetti westerns. That's a lot of that stuff is Italian filmmaking, and so we haven't really mentioned too many films like outside the states or the UK really yet. And
right,
so
right,
I wanted to mention a few films here that I really love from this time period because obviously in the '60s it's really huge, especially in like France, for instance. And now there's all different types of French filmmakers doing a lot of different things, right? So you have like Varda, Godard, Truffaut, all like that. But I wanted to talk about Jacques Tati, um,
mm,
someone who's just in the name of this film, Playtime. It's just an absolute fun film of just like architectural wonder and like kind of a where's Waldo kind of world where you're just put and set into this I guess industry of a city, and then also at the same time just like following around this almost like Python-esque of like just I mean this predates Monty Python, obviously. This came out in 1967, but like it's kind of silly and a little bit like in the name, like I said, Playtime. It's just this guy just going around and just being in these random locations, and you're kind of just like kind of watching him zip, like going through these different spots and meeting different people, and at a very far distance too, because a lot of the times you're not even really present within that conversation that he might be having with somebody. It's not really about that. It's about like just like exploration and adventure, and like just getting lost into this cacophony of what maybe there was some statement of like getting lost into the hubbub of a lot of the stuff that societies kind of put up and like as buildings, and there might be way too much emphasis put on to work. And I think that's kind of what some of the messaging behind this was, is like, hey, have fun with it. Like, don't get so lost into this thing that we've all kind of sold ourselves on to keep things running. So I might be grasping at straws there too. but Playtime is just an absolute fun film. And I think this one is actually out of print, this particular disc. But
Yeah.
there's the Jacques Tati box set, which I highly recommend, which has this film in it.
Yep. I love Playtime.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my entry point to Tati's work. And upon seeing Playtime via the channel, that might have even been Filmstruck where I saw that when I watched that for the first time. Anyways, I love what they do with just setting up shots. Like you were saying, you're not even necessarily always directly, with kind of the subject in terms of conversations, whatnot, but just the way that they set up shots is just incredible. Now, he didn't I don't know who directed it. Tati didn't direct it, did he?
Choreographed. Yeah, I think he did direct it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's one of his later films too. It's following Monsieur Hulot, his character that he follows a lot in his other films. But yeah, he directed this. Let's see if there's anything added to this. That it's been a bit since I've seen it. But yeah, it's got a lot of interesting extra features with it, in particular that I think carried over on the set. So
yeah, no, but I mean, even just looking, because I remember it's been a little bit since I've seen it, but from what I remember too, like there's large portions where there's not any direct dialogue and things like that. It's more just it's just this visual treat to see how he sets up shots and like little comedic gags that take place. And I remember something with is it that a glass door shatters and then the handle, so the guy whoever's handling the door, the doorman, he just puts, because it's a glass, it's an all glass door and the glass shatters and he holds up the handle as if the door's still there.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he pulls open but just little comedic gags like that, and just the setup of shots, it's really it's a gem.
Yeah, I guess it's pulling from like Chaplin and Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd, and then kind of transforming it into a French sense and having some critique there, and then eventually you would get British versions of it, kind of like with Monty Python. You could see a little bit of a through line with some of that stuff. But yeah, it's a great piece of work, and I highly recommend it. And get that box set during the sale. But
amazing time to pick up that set is during the sale.
And the last Criterion I'll mention here, in this, another film from overseas that I really like, that I watched a few years ago, actually, is directed by Masaki Kobayashi. It's a Japanese film from 1962, Harakiri. It's one of my favorites, kind of dramas that is like a trial that like kind of pieces the puzzles together of a man who comes, during this really peaceful era. This is during like I want to say the Tokugawa shogunate. So it's just like a lot of these Japanese feudal period, and it's a peaceful time where like war is really kind of just settled down. But there's a lot of wandering ronin, which are like masterless samurai, and some of their lords had lost land, and so a lot of them just can't really acclimate to civilian life, and so some of them want to end their life in the way of harakiri, which is killing yourself in a ritual suicide. And so they go to these temples that are still around with some other samurai retainers that are there, and they put themselves there and like, hey, I want to do this. And I guess it's a cowardice thing too, because some of the people who do it, they're offered money to just like walk away from this and just don't do this, and so it starts becoming a thing. And you see that early on in some of the first few scenes where some of these people, retainers, are just getting turned away, or these ronin are getting turned away, so they like, hey, we don't have to deal with this, like they're just looking for money because they're poor, right? But it gets to become a tale of like, kind of like what Rashomon does, where it's like you're trying to like piece together like the past of like, okay, well, why is this one particular guy like this? There's something strange about our main character, Tatsuya Nakadai, and there's something really like interesting about him. Like, why is he coming here to like, commit this act, because it really is, in the eyes of, the samurai, it's a very honorable thing, but at the same time, Kobayashi is actually kind of critiquing this old Japanese tradition a little bit, and saying like, well, what does it actually what does it mean? Like, what, like, does it actually matter? And like, who are the people who are really promoting something along the lines of this? Is like, is it okay? And I know I just went on a long time about it, but I want people to watch this movie. So, Harakiri.
Yeah, and I've actually got that in my collection, and I have not seen it yet.
It's a good one.
Yeah, one that definitely comes up pretty consistently within the Criterion community. So I've got it over on the shelf, and I will make sure to watch that soon.
Yeah. Well, what's your last pick?
My last pick might be coming a little bit out of left field. I don't think a lot of people have seen this film, and this is by way of Indicator, and this is directed by Joseph L. Anderson, and this is called Spring Night, Summer Night. So again, this list, like, obviously I do have some favorites on this list, but I'm not even necessarily saying this is like, if you're going to watch, any film in the 60s, watch Spring Night, Summer Night. But it is an extremely effective film. It's a pretty contained story in terms of the arc. It's kind of a snapshot of like a lower class, kind of borderline, like, impoverished lifestyle. This is filmed in southeastern Ohio, and it focuses on a family that is, relationships aren't the greatest, and there's mother and father are just kind of very loosely married. Mom's kind of out, at the local bar scene, and kind of has another guy, and just, again, very kind of a very poor lifestyle. Like, there's nothing else really to do, so you're hanging out at bars, or you're going around and kicking dirt, basically. And so we get kind of the profile of this family, and the daughter. So it's also a mixed family. So yeah, so you have half siblings, and whatever. It's a mixed family, and one of the daughters ends up getting pregnant, and the dad is basically, who he's actually not, well, it comes into question if he's even her father, and kind of he's going around town, basically interrogating different individuals, trying to find out who impregnated his daughter. And so, again, this is kind of a subject. I wonder how this was received. Now, this is a really little film in terms of its distribution and whatnot, but in a more independent, well, very independent production here. But I wonder how this was received in the 60s. And so he's going around trying to figure out who impregnated his daughter, and we know the truth well before he does. In fact, you could cut this film off at about the 20-minute mark and have a pretty engaging short film. But it's after that point that a lot of this comes to a head. And anyways, it's there's a quote from the father in here. He says, "You try to live your life right, but it just don't work out." These are people that are dealing with bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, it feels like. And it's a story also that directly contradicts kind of traditional practices of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And it does so in kind of it really doesn't hold back on the issues that it's exploring. So really interesting film, and a great addition here from Indicator. and they even went as far as to do a new 4K restoration on this little film. And it was actually Nicholas Winding Refn who
The Drive.
directed Drive,
Yeah.
which is, gosh, a fantastic film. He actually kind of took on this project. So the film actually even says presented by Nicholas Winding Refn. So he kind of took on this. He was trying to fill in a gap on the American independent cinema scene, and said this is like the lost film that needed to be uncovered, kind of. So he obviously feels like the importance of this film is really up there in terms of American independent cinema. And I have to agree with him. I think it's a very effective film, very uncomfortable in terms of its subject matter. And I'm 100% not going to give away, any spoilers on this, because there's some dynamics there that as you watch the film, it's like, whoa, yeah, that's wow. They were exploring this in the 60s. Wow. But
I need to get that series. I need to get that.
Seriously, your next indicator order, you will not regret adding this title in if that's one that you want to go for. But and typical indicator fashion, it's like jam packed with extra features. And I haven't gone through the whole supplement package on this one yet, but it just goes on and on and on. And as always with them, there's the great booklet and everything as well. So that is my final pick for this video. Spring Night, Summer Night, kind of my out of left field pick that I never heard of the film until Indicator announced it. Well worth your time.
Well, some of those things that you mentioned kind of reminded me of some other films. So like, for instance, something like In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah.
A little bit, just about, like race relations, one another, Sidney Poitier, talking to him about him again. But also just like trying to figure out, this person who's committed this crime, or, like this, like knocked up somebody. It's like, well, we got to figure out what happened here. In this particular film as well. But yeah, this is another one that I would recommend if anyone's not seen it. It also talks about the South in America, and the race relationships there. But yeah, if you haven't seen that, I don't know. I just, based on hearing what you talked about with your pick, I feel like that would be a decent pairing with it.
Yeah. No, In the Heat of the Night is a great film, and that's I've got the Criterion edition as well. But yeah, I could see that being a pairing.
But I guess for my final pick, I'd have to pick one of the biggest films of all time. And just in terms of scope and things that it's influenced so much. There's so many things we didn't mention. Like we didn't really mention like Easy Rider and a lot of the BBS stories, like speaking of American cinema in particular, like those transformation years. But I want to say this might be one of the biggest films ever made, and I'm talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey, right here. The Stanley Kubrick film, which is definitely in my top 3 Stanley Kubrick films of all time. We have to go a little later, and maybe some other decades to talk about the other ones. But this film is, I mean, if you haven't seen it, like, I don't know how to describe it really necessarily, just because it's such a visual experience. And I have the 4K right here, which I still haven't seen, but I'm very excited to eventually watch it. But I just haven't had the headspace for it, because it's a daunting film. It's one of those films that I think a lot of people initially when they watched it, didn't know what to expect. And it's one of the biggest, I would say, art house films of all time. Just because like it really is kind of like, I guess, Citizen Kane on a level where it's like, it's not necessarily super like straightforward. You can't really follow everything. Like, it requires kind of your attention and to kind of watch this thing unfold. In this particular film, there's just a lot of different segments, that will hold your attention and will just like fascinate you in a lot of different ways. So this is also at the height of the space race, this is this is 1969, I want to say, is when this came out. Right? I want to say 1969.
I don't recall off the top of my head. That's about right.
People are going to blast us in the comment section,
Yeah.
but
Come
that's
on,
okay.
people.
Yeah, but yeah, so I wanted to mention this one, and I also just wanted to mention two other films, just really quick, just based kind of in the same, in very different worlds. I just want to mention there, but just like if it requires a little bit of like attention to watch, like 2001: A Space Odyssey is a movie that like requires your attention. Some other films, yeah, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I still don't even pretend to understand 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things that I love so much about it is that, and
ambiguous.
Kubrick with a lot of his films, it's like there's not an answer. So you dig and dig and dig, and Kubrick himself would never admit to, oh, this is what this means.
Hmm.
And that's just, I think, one of the best things about the film. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you're perfectly fine. I mean, there's so much to talk about with that film. It's never ending. The other
Yeah.
films I wanted to mention are also two films that are outside of United States. Actually, one is by Andrei Tarkovsky. It's actually his second film from 1966. Andrei Rublev, right here. This is a film about if you have patience and you are interested in, like, if you were a fan of The Last Temptation of Christ or of Silence from Scorsese, like I think you will be interested in this, and it really does play on just the notion of faith and sticking to your faith. And like this is a trudge of a film, 183 minutes, so a little over 3 hours, but
Yeah.
I watched it in a particular setting that like it just was super immersive, and it's a film Tarkovsky's known for his immersive films, and I've only seen this film from him, so I'm not a Tarkovsky expert whatsoever, but I just remember being blown away by this film, and also it testing me quite a bit. I'm personally I'm agnostic, but at the same time I've had my own journeys with religion in the past and my own faith. And so I think this is very relatable, at least in my worldview. And so I think it's a very interesting film to watch nonetheless. You seen this one?
And this is going to make me sound, I don't know. I couldn't get through it.
It's hard. It's really hard to get through.
But I plan on going back. It's like sometimes, and I even talked about this recently on my channel. Sometimes you're not ready for a film, and that's okay. No. I mean, Tarkovsky, I know, is going to be one for me that it's going to take a long time for me to kind of understand. So I've seen Stalker. I've seen, I've started in on Andrei Rublev, and then I actually just picked up Mirror.
Yeah, me too.
Via the sale. I think that looks endlessly interesting. I mean, from the research that I've done on Mirror, I'm like, okay, like that might be what kind of finally pulls me in. Just the subject matter of Mirror sounds really interesting to me.
It's gonna be a hard movie to watch though too, from what I've heard.
Yeah, so it's one of those, like, I don't have anything against directors where it takes a lot of time, to kind of get acclimated, but I also don't want to watch and just slog through a film just to say that I got through it. I want to be able to engage with the work.
Exactly.
So it was a very active choice for me to say, I'm done with Andrei Rublev for right now.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back to it. Stalker, really the same thing. There were elements that connected with me, but there was a lot that was just so enigmatic,
abstract,
about just like so many variations on what, how you could, kind of dissect and understand things in the film, going on in the film, but or interpret is the word I was looking for. Anyways, so I'm glad that it seems like you enjoy Andrei Rublev, and I look forward to going back and looking more into it. So
yeah, it'll probably take me like a decade to watch it again. So because it's I mean, like I was in a particular spot. I watched it in a theater with some friends, and I was very lucky to do that because I was able to shut off everything and just kind of be immersed into the thing. And sometimes you need that immersion for things like that.
Sure.
And then the last thing I wanted to mention is just because, of course, he's one of my favorite directors of all time. And this is like one of his most transformative films. Swedish director, Ingmar Bergman, Persona. I wanted to mention it from 1966. This is one of my first Criterions that I ever picked up. I had picked up The Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries previously, I mentioned that when I was talking with Chris in the 50s. But yeah, this is such a delight of a film. I mean, I don't know if delight is the right word to say of it, but it's one of those films that Bergman, like you could tell, was like shifting a little bit with his storytelling and his artistic touch. And I think Persona is something that is probably another one of those films, just like 2001 and Andrei Rublev. It's like, I can't really talk much about it. It's like you have to watch it and kind of understand
Yep.
from that angle to kind of experience what I'm mentioning here. So,
Yep.
yeah, incredible film.
Yeah. That's one I've seen as well, and there's a lot to unpack there, and one that I look forward to revisiting as well.
But yeah, that's our choices. Do you have anything else to say about the 60s?
Just a couple other titles I wanted to bring up really quick, and this is one that I'm like beating myself up for not putting on my top 5, but I wanted to squeeze in Spring Night, Summer Night in there. But The Odd Couple, Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon.
Still haven't seen it.
Oh man, top of your list right now.
Go
watch it.
All right, see everyone. I gotta go watch this.
It's fantastic. One of my favorite, probably top 3 or 4 comedies of all time, I'd say. And then also Stanley Kramer, It's a Mad
Yes.
World. Yeah, you got the Criterion on that one as well. Yeah, I got the digipack on that one as well. I know that's in standard packaging now. Straight Jacket, which I brought up before, William Castle, Boy Named Charlie Brown, which we talked about. Shenandoah is being released by Kino Lorber, so I think that one is really, as they say, kind of ripe for rediscovery for those that are interested in Westerns. Shenandoah is a really, really effective film. And then I'll end with a 3 more here. So Wait Until Dark, Audrey Hepburn.
I haven't seen it. I have it here.
Oh, it is so good.
Alan Arkin.
That's it. Yeah, Warner Archive did a great edition on that one. Yeah, Alan Arkin. The Graduate. This is must see film. And finally, I'll end with because growing up, I was really, we were kind of like Disney films were on the regular, and The Parent Trap, Haley Mills, bless her heart, I love Haley Mills. The Parent Trap and Swiss Family Robinson are just too nostalgic, like hit that nostalgia bullseye for me. Because there were some great, really fun Disney movies in that era. And then I don't know if I brought up a second ago, did I say Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Oh my goodness.
Is also available via Warner Archive.
Right.
Where's it at? Yeah, and that's a very searing, very confrontational kind
Somewhere
of drama. Yeah. I trust that you have that one on your shelf.
I do. It's very, actually, I know where it's at because I will talk about it in a video soon. So that's why.
Yeah, great film.
Mm-hmm.
And the recently passed away George Siegel or Segal? George Siegel. He just passed away recently, and man, he gives a great performance there, but just really, really effective film there. So that's and then the only other thing I wanted to mention, I know we're not talking about TV shows here, but my favorite TV show of all time is The Twilight Zone.
Oh yes, I have it right over there. I'm still watching it.
Easily my favorite TV show of all time. And I just wanted to highlight my favorite episode from season 1. It aired originally October 30th, 1959, and that is Walking Distance. And so that stars Gig Young and Frank Overton. And Frank Overton we talked about earlier because he actually played Sheriff Tate in To Kill a Mockingbird. And in the second monologue that I'll bring up during this video, he gives a monologue to Gig Young at the end of that episode that is just incredibly effective, about childhood, about leaving your childhood behind and moving on in your life. And it's another thing. I'm such a baby. It's another thing that just every time I watch it, I'm just like sitting here sobbing. And but yeah, that's a TV show. Rod Serling, just masterful TV show that really explored a lot of, like, some of the episodes were sci-fi or horror for the sake of that genre, but other times there's really engaging social commentaries, and the monsters are due on Maple Street. I don't know
Oh
if you,
yeah, that one's great.
boy, I mean, that's
The Burbs did that later.
Yes, absolutely.
A little extent, yeah.
No, I love that comparison of the Burbs, because it's about that whole, the mob mentality, and it's just like how, in some of the subjects that they explore, it's like, how do they have the foresight to talk about some of these things that like, sure, they were, you could say, well, they were dealing with it then, but things that are, it's just like, it could not be more applicable to 2021.
Right.
Like, this is exactly what we're dealing with now. And I don't know if that's more of a sad note on humanity in general, maybe, but just, again, some of these ideas that are explored. The Twilight Zone has been just kind of a companion of mine for many years, and one that I really treasure. So had to bring up one TV show.
It's a good one to bring up.
It started in the 50s. It went from 59 to 64, so it ran 5 seasons. But for this conversation, I feel like that needs to be out there.
Absolutely, and I'm thankful that I'm going through it right now. I'm on season 2, so it's a lot of fun. I've been having a blast with it. So
you've seen Walking Distance.
Yep, and Monsters on Maple Street. Yep, I've seen that one too.
Nice. Awesome.
But yeah, this has been a lot of fun. The 1960s have so much to offer for so many people, and I know we didn't mention anything. Like, we didn't mention Hammer films. We didn't, because that's like kind of like the this is the burst of Hammer stuff that we would talk about, and there's so many things we probably didn't mention. But like, let us know in the comment section down below some things that you really like from the 60s, and some movies that you think need some attention. And we'd be happy to interact with you down there. David, where could we find you?
Yeah, so my main channels now, I'm on YouTube via Cartoon Fortress. So if you search Cartoon Fortress, I'll come up. And I'm also on Instagram. Mostly I use Instagram as a vehicle just to post new video content, so it just kind of points you back to YouTube. So YouTube's really the main place. I'm not on Facebook or Twitter. I try and limit my social media as much as much as
I'm wanting to do that more and more.
Yeah, to be quite honest, it's most of it I just don't really like engaging with. But yeah, YouTube and Instagram, Cartoon Fortress, I'll be right there.
I'll be linking those in the description down below. I hope you enjoyed our conversation, and I hope it sparked some ideas for all of you who are watching. I hope you enjoyed it, stuck around to the end. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you like this video, comment down below, share, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you next time. We're not jonesing around.